Greetings, beloveds online, and peace be with you. I'm Reverend Mitzi, and welcome to Unity of Tempe. And if you're watching online, come join us in person. We really would love to welcome you back here. So last week we began a short series, When God Calls, What Do You Do? And in this series, we're unpacking a relevant piece of literature about someone who struggled with anger, resentment, fear, depression, and a whole lot more. Anyone ever struggled with any of those things? Yeah. Someone who resisted the call of spirit when guided to do something helpful that involved people towards whom he had anger. Perhaps you relate. We're looking at the book of Jonah, which is replete with metaphysical and metaphorical meaning applicable in our lives and the times in which we live. So last week we explored chapter 1, including context and background and why Jonah is so relevant today, along with unity interpretation. And today we're going to look at chapter 2. But before we dive in, here's a very short and amusing recap of chapter 1 of the book of Jonah.
Once upon a time, in a land far, far away, was a man named Jonah.
Jonah, arise, go to Nineveh, the great city, and call out against it, for their evil has come before me.
But Jonah rose to flee to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord.
Gotta get away from the Lord.
He went to Joppa and found a ship going to Tarshish, so he paid the fare. Went on board to go to Tarshish away from the presence of the Lord. But the Lord hurled a great wind upon the sea, and there was a mighty tempest, so that the ship was threatened to break upon. Then the mariners were afraid and cried out to their God.
Yag, we be afraid. Lord, have mercy. Yag!
And they hurled the cargo that was in the ship into the sea to lighten it for them. But Jonah had gone down into the inner part of the ship and had laid down fast asleep.
We gotta get away from the Lord.
Sleep? Yarg! Arise and call out to your God. Perhaps your God will give a thought to us that we may not perish. Yarg!
They said to one another,
Yarg! Come, let us cast lots that we may know on whose account this evil has come upon us. Yarg!
So they cast the lots, and the lots fell to Jonah.
Yarg!
Yag!
The mariners, they questioned Jonah. Then Jonah responded,
Pick me up and hurl me into the sea. Then the sea may quiet down for you. For I know it's because of me that this great tempest has come upon you.
So they hurled him into the sea, and the sea ceased from its raging. The men feared the Lord exceedingly, and they offered a sacrifice to the Lord.
Yarg! Praise to the Lord.
Yarg! Praise him!
And the Lord appointed a great fish to swallow Jonah.
Great fish, go swallow my servant Jonah.
Gotta get away from the Lord.
So, basically, God calls Jonah to send a message to people he considers his enemies, the Ninevites. And he has good reason, because he thinks that these people may have attacked and even killed his own people and his own family. And so it's deeper than this, and it's deeper than the traditional story that we get told. It's just disobedience. No, there's a lot going on in this story. And Jonah runs the other way. And because Carla loved this map so much, here you go, here it is again, because it really shows that this area is very relevant to the times in which we live in right now. Tel Aviv around here, and just so much is going on in this area. So last week we followed the wise words of Elizabeth Sand Turner, who was a unity minister and author. And if you remember, she gave a whole long reason to say this, but in looking at any scripture from a metaphysical and metaphorical standpoint, she said something. She said, before you begin to dive in, she said, she affirms, let there be light. And we did that. So let's do that again this week. Let there be light. Yes, indeed. Oh, I don't have a slide for that, no. So now we're going to move on to chapter 2 of Jonah, which is a prayer of raw honesty and vulnerability. And it's actually a lot like things that are found in the Psalms, where we have those depths of raw vulnerability. Anyone ever read any Psalms here? They're really helpful when we're going through challenging times, because we find out, oh, perhaps the emotions I'm feeling right now aren't so new. I mean, people have been struggling with their feelings for millennia on the planet, right? And still struggling. So here we go on to chapter 2, which is a prayer. From inside the fish, Jonah prayed to the Lord his God. He said, in my distress, I called to the Lord, and he answered me. From deep in the realm of the dead, I called for help, and you listened to my cry. You hurled me into the depths, into the very heart of the seas, and the currents swirled about me. All your waves and breakers swept over me. I said, I have been banished from your sight, yet I will look again towards your holy temple. The engulfing waters threatened me, the deep surrounded me, seaweed was wrapped around my head. To the roots of the mountains I sank down, the earth beneath me barred me in forever. But you, my Lord, you, Lord my God, brought my life up from the pit. When my life was ebbing away, I remembered you, Lord, and my prayer rose to you, to your holy temple. Those who cling to worthless idols turn away from God's love for them. But I, with shouts of grateful praise, will sacrifice to you. What I have vowed, I will make good. I will say salvation comes from the Lord. And the Lord commanded the fish, and it vomited Jonah onto dry land. So this is quite a prayer, right? Yeah. And so we're going to explore it in greater detail. So we're going to go through it in 3 parts, just like these slides were. And we're going to look at them and sort of see, what is this saying to us? What wisdom does it have for us today? So let's look at the first part. From inside the fish, Jonah prayed to the Lord his God. He said, in my distress I called to the Lord, and he answered me. From deep in the realm of the dead I called for help, and you listened to my cry. You hurled me into the depths, and into the very heart of the seas, and the currents swirled about me. All your waves and breakers swept over me. So in his distress, what does Jonah do? He calls out in prayer, right? And he feels the presence again. So many people, what do they do in times of trouble? Yeah, many people call out most when they're going through times of trouble. And even, I'm sure you've heard of this, even people who normally would not pray might ask you for a prayer when they're going through some dire circumstances, right? We see that on social media all the time. Please pray for by people you're like, I never would have thought they would have asked for a prayer. Like the rest of the book of Jonah, this prayer is filled with imagery. It's filled with metaphor and metaphysical concepts. So the sea, What does the sea represent? Well, it represents chaos. And it represents turbulence. And in Jonah's case, turbulence and chaos in his spirit and his subconscious mind. Have you ever felt some turbulence in your mind? Have you ever felt in your spirit some turbulence? Yes, right? We all go through difficult times in our lives, but it's often through those darkest times, those most turbulent times, that our calling becomes clearer. We've all heard of people who went through something horrific, and then what did they do? They started up a nonprofit for the very thing that was really horrific in their life. They said, I'm going to start Mothers Against Drunk Drivers, or I'm going to start something else that has come out of a deep, deep capacity of grief or anger or bitterness. Metaphysically, the great fish, what does this symbolize? Well, it's a temporary solution to a bad situation, representing an opportunity to emerge transformed. Because Jonah does emerge transformed, right? Jonah had felt the divine presence directing him to do something he was unwilling to do. Have you ever felt a calling to something you're unwilling to do, ever? No, nobody. I have. It's like, go forgive that person. No, I don't want to. Right? And then finally, we might get to the point where we're able to do that. He had no desire to warn the Ninevites to change their ways or face impending doom because his sense of justice was appalled. And so he heads off in another direction. But what happens when we ignore that inner calling? We feel turbulent, right? We feel at sea. We feel that. And so what does he do? He asks the sailors to throw him overboard. And our own Jonah consciousness can be distracted by many diversions, yet choices have consequences. The law of cause and effect, that's right. We may spend a lot of time suffering through storms, but there is an innate awareness, and that's represented by the sailors in this story, that the underlying problem is that we're out of alignment with our spiritual source and purpose. And it's only by moving deeper into the storm, by surrendering to the consequences of our choices, that we're given the opportunity to pause and take stock and make new choices. Have you ever had something happen and you're seething with anger, and then you go away and you think about it and you're like, oh. And you kind of like there. And so this great fish is not a punishment. Many people will look at it as a punishment, but it's not. It's actually a divine time out, so that Jonah can have an opportunity to return to source. Like us, sometimes we get a divine time out. Anyone had that happen in their lives, right? Yet Jonah, what does he do? He does not realign easily. Even when he's calling on God, the indwelling presence, he doesn't take any responsibility for his actions. What does he do? He blames God, right? You hurled me into the sea. You can just hear it. You hurled me into the sea. You expect me to do that? You hurled me into... he's really having a go at God throughout this whole thing, or the indwelling spirit's presence. But God, the indwelling presence, does not ever hurl us into the depths. We hurl ourselves into the depths. And many things may give reason to why we feel in the depths. We go through grief. We go through anger. We go through worry and angst and all the difficulties of the world. We can feel overwhelmed at times, but it is not the spirit within, the Christ presence God, that causes us to feel that way. It's our cutting ourselves off from the presence. And when things are going on all around and we feel disconnected from our spiritual source, it can feel like we're drowning in our own emotions. Anyone ever had that? You feel like put your hand up if you've ever felt like you're drowning in your own emotions. If you've never felt that way, just wait. Because we're human beings. We're spiritual beings, have a very human experience. Now, sometimes when people feel like they're drowning in emotional overwhelm, they want to find a sense of reprieve anywhere. If I could just let some of this go. If I could just feel a tiny bit better. So what do? Start venge and blame. Well, that person, it's that person's fault, or it's that, their fault. Because it's too much, and so the blame game begins. Anything rather than look within. So let's go to the next part of the prayer. I said, I have been banished from your sight, yet I will look again towards your holy temple. The engulfing waters threatened me. The deep surrounded me. Seaweed was wrapped around my head. To the roots of the mountains I sank down. The earth beneath barred me in forever. But you, Lord my God, brought my life up from the pit. So in ancient times, people believed that it took 3 days and 3 nights to travel to the underworld, which was known as Sheol, and back. And Jonah went through hell and back. Now, this wasn't a literal hell, but symbolic, a symbolic pit of despair. Being engulfed in a really big, smelly fish would be a stinky experience. And in our times of despair, it can get pretty stinky for us, metaphorically, with our stinking thinking, and literally, we might begin to smell a bit when we're going through a really challenging time, because often we don't feel like showering or taking care of ourselves when we're in that real depth, right? So when going through hard times, it's important to seek support and to remember that we're not our feelings. And it's important to allow ourselves and others the freedom to experience the depth of pain and hurt before they can and we can begin to heal. Often we want to just speed someone along. We want to do something because we want them to feel better. Don't be there, be here. Yet sometimes it's just allowing that person to be where they are. And it's important to not just take a real open wound and stick a Band-Aid on it. Because when we do that with our feelings, with the deep depth of despair, it can feel like we're trying to Band-Aid an amputated limb. That doesn't work too well. It's also important to not get stuck in those feelings, in the pit of despair. So Jonah makes a decision to re-embrace his divine connection when he says, I have been banished from your sight, yet I will look again towards your holy temple. So in our distress, we reach out to the indwelling presence, the Christ presence, and we are always heard because God is always with us. But we can choose to shut off that connection. Jonah banished himself through his thoughts of fear and anger and bitterness. Yet with time to contemplate, he decides to realign with the source. So now let's examine the deeper meaning of the conclusion of the prayer. Oh, wrong one. Okay. Oh. Okay, all right. Those who cling, it starts here. Those who cling to worthless idols turn away from God's love for them. But I, with shouts of grateful praise, will sacrifice to you. What I have vowed I will make good. I will say salvation comes from the Lord. And the Lord commanded the fish, and it vomited Jonah onto dry land. So there's some words in here that we don't say in unity very often at all. Salvation and idols and sacrifice, those aren't really things that we talk of in a spiritual context. But we're going to examine those metaphorically, metaphysically. So let's look first at the idols of the worthless idols. What could those be metaphysically? Well, who has ever spent time clinging to fear, resentment, anger, jealousy? Ever, like for more than a minute, right? Probably all of us have had that. Those are kind of worthless idols, right? And then we've got all sorts of addictions. Yeah, including shopping for some, or on being online, or for me, it can at times be worthless, but I try to not make it worthless. And that is my addiction to streaming my favorite and binging my favorite shows. You know, I have to make sure, am I doing this too much? Is it a worthless idol, or am I doing it to relax and then recharge and then bam, right? We cut off our divine connection when we're more focused on those things. Those things aren't inherently bad because we're going to feel anger. But when we cling to those things more than focusing on God's love being revealed through us. Does that make sense? Yeah. So our sacrifice, what does this word mean? Well, it's our decision, and it's a really great decision to leave the worthless idols, whatever they are for us, behind, and recognize again our oneness with God and with everyone on the planet. And sometimes that's an ongoing thing, because we see people doing stuff and we're like, yeah, you're not one with me. To realign again. And our salvation, another loaded word, is the freedom that comes from being aligned with good and the divine callings God places on our hearts. So you read this in a different way now. You're like, oh, those words, they're heavy, loaded words. But when we read it this way, we have a different look at it. So when after ignoring a God call, we decide to return to our spiritual connection, we can feel like we're coming off an emotional hangover. Anyone ever had an emotional hangover ever? Raise your hand so I know I'm not alone. Oh my gosh, those are intense. You're like, ooh. But you also feel like this sense of hope too when you're coming out of it. You're like, I was there and now I'm coming out of it. Thank you, God, I'm coming out of it. As we surrender, aligning with the direction of connection, we can feel release, like Jonah must have felt after being vomited out of the fish. I mean, metaphorically, we can feel when we're coming out of that hangover, we're being vomited out of that thing that was really our choice to focus on. We were focusing on all of that, and we just need time. We just need time sometimes to go, yeah, I was there, but I don't want to be there anymore, right? We're out of chaos and back on dry land, but hopefully we're not covered in any stinky digestive juices like Jonah. And aren't we all really a little like Jonah? Sometimes we get a message and we act on it right away, and sometimes we just don't want to hear it, and we certainly don't want to do it. So we ignore it. And sometimes we know following the message is in our best interest, but it comes attached with other baggage. So we put it off as long as possible. So next week, we're going to continue on the saga of Jonah, metaphysically exploring it and the practical relevance this has for us, this journey. Did you enjoy today? Did you get something out of today? Did you find some metaphysical interpretation that you were like, I never thought of it that way? Good, because that's what this is about. So I was looking for a song to, anchor this message in. And what came to me was that we're all longing for peace in our world. And we recognize that truly the only thing we really have control over is what? Our thoughts. Sometimes that's challenging, right? But our thoughts, our words, and our actions. So here's a beautiful prayer to support us. It's from Unity. It's got some lovely music in it to support us in contributing peace to ourselves, to each other, and to the planet.
I am the power of peace in all matters. One with the power of divine peace. I am the very presence of peace in my world. My thoughts, words, and actions are all in harmony, so that I project peace from the inside out. I am clear that peace is not a smiley face mask I wear, but a calm, confident generosity of spirit released from within. How beautiful, how beautiful, how beautiful you are. How beautiful, how beautiful, how beautiful you are. As day follows night, peaceful action flows from my peace of mind. I am the power of peace expressed in my thoughts. Releasing thoughts that separate or denigrate, I raise my consciousness to the God standard of oneness. I bring about peace through my thoughts. I am the power of peace expressed in my words. My words heal and harmonize, uplift and appreciate. Powerfully and peacefully, I speak to right wrongs and improve conditions. I bring about peace through my words. I am the power of peace expressed in my actions. Boldly, I walk a path of peace guided by inner wisdom. All that I do fosters mutual blessings. I bring about peace through my actions. Peace is in the midst of me, as I become the presence of peace in the midst of every circumstance. How beautiful, how beautiful, how beautiful you are.
Wasn't that lovely? From Unity World Day of Prayer 2017. Just seems so appropriate for right now. And how beautiful you are, beloveds. How beautiful you are. And so let us say together, I am a beloved child of God, here to be an ambassador of good. Yes, indeed. So it is time to share our blessings right now. I invite you to take them to your chest and see them just expanding and contributing to the world in beautiful ways and coming back to you in a multitude of ways. And let us say together, I am a joyful I'm the only one saying it. We'll start again. I am a joyful sharer of my good. I remember that as I give, I receive, and that God is my source. Yes, indeed. And if you prefer to give online, we'll get to that in a moment. We have PayPal and Zelle as well. Yes. And Carla, I can't wait to give my blessing. Yes. Thank you. And so if you're online or if you prefer to give this way, Zelle, unityoftempe@gmail.com or PayPal. Thank you, thank you, thank you so very much. Thank you, Carla, for doing that. We also bless every prayer that has ever been in the prayer box or will ever be in the prayer box. Thank you, God. And we bless these gifts. We bless them. We see them multiplied. We see them coming back to each person a bazillion-fold. And we bless how they are used also. It is what supports us at Unity of Tempe. And for those who gave recently online, thank you as well. Thank you, Carla. And so I think everyone's here knows about this, that we support Matthew's Crossing with Church of the Epiphany. If you have food items you want to bring in, even one little thing or something, all helps. And just remember that you are important, you matter, you make a difference. Be with us next week as we continue our journey with Jonah and discover practical insight, inspiration for life. And we're kind of going to go out of the pit of despair, but we're still in Jonah and discovering how he really, in many ways, this book is a reflection of spiritual truths to us, because he is this guy who is a very unlikely prophet. Sometimes we might think, why have I been called to this? So who will you invite next week? And we affirm the roads will be running beautifully and freely so that we will have our crew here next week with us. And so, forgotten what comes next. Oh, my little order of service is gone somewhere. Took a little walk, so we're going to see. Is it their song next? Okay, oh, right. So we're going to say our prayer of protection. This is what happens when my order of service goes. Oh, wait, I found it. I was like Jonah in that flame, right? Like, who took it? No, thank you, God. I'm spewed up from the belly of the fish, and I am back in love being the light. Okay, let us say together, the light of God surrounds us, the love of God enfolds us, the power of God protects us, the presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is. All is well, and we are grateful. Yes, indeed. Okay, now, beloveds online, come be with us soon. Have a beautiful week. Be the light.